Vancouver provided the colourful setting for the 5th British Empire and Commonwealth Games, and during his Canadian tour, the Duke of Edinburgh saw a number of the contests. His arrival at the stadium, where he inspected the Seaforth's Guard of Honour, was a notable occasion, and he was, of course, accorded the warmest of receptions. His Royal Highness also inspected a Guard of Honour mounted by representatives of all 3 services. Spectators in the specially built stadium saw a close race in the men's 220-yard sprint. If it didn't produce a record, it certainly provided a thrill, with the first 2 returning the same time, 21.5. Jowett of New Zealand just beating Nelson of England, Wales taking 3rd place. The 3-mile event was one in which either Chatterway or Green were likely winners, for both had previously broken the world record. Neither of them were prominent in the opening phase, but that's as you'd expect. It was about halfway around the final lap that Chatterway turned on the heat. In a brilliant burst of speed, he went right away from the field. Incidentally, England had 4 men home in the first 5. Yes, he went right away to win by 20 yards from Green in 13 minutes 35.2, a new games record. The 120 yards hurdles now. Jamaica, England, Canada and Australia were there, with Doubleday of Australia the favourite. Doubleday indeed was going strong till near the end, when a trip and a stumble put him out of the race, which was won by Gardiner of Jamaica, with England 2nd and Canada 3rd. Winner's time, 14.2. The women's 220 yards seemed to be a certainty for Australia's Olympic champion, Mrs. Jackson Nelson, and so it proved to be. The issue, in fact, was never in doubt. She'd previously won the 100 yards, and she now completed the double by easily beating her compatriot, Miss Cripps, and equaling her own world record of 24 seconds. His Royal Highness now came to see something of the rowing finals on the Canal. One of the highlights here was the pair Oars. Nearest the camera, Clack and Christie of England were unable to hold New Zealand's pair, Parker and Douglas, in the centre, while Australia, the far side, finished 3rd. Swimming now, and how attractive that turquoise blue water looks. This full-size pool holds 500,000 gallons, by the way, and it's changed every 7 hours. After a false start in the women's 110 yards freestyle event, away went the competitors with a splash. Youth came right into the picture here, for the oldest of the finalists was only 18, Miss Harrison, South Africa's champion. A smart turn at the end of the pool, and now they're heading for home, led by Miss Lorraine Crapp, Australia's 15-year-old title holder. Beating Miss Grant of Canada, who was 2nd, and Miss Harrison, she set a new games record of 1 minute 5.8. Next, the women's 220 yards breaststroke. And my word, how these girls can move through the water. Anyone who wants to learn how to swim should take a look at this. Miss Gordon of Scotland, who won the event in the 1950 games at Auckland, New Zealand, came out in front again, leading from Miss Morgan of South Africa, who was just ahead of England's Miss Grundy. She went on to score an 8-yard victory in 2 minutes 59.2, another new games record. Diving contests, always a delight to watch, were no exception here. The winner in the 10-metre springboard event was Heatley, another Scottish victory. Again, the Duke was a keen spectator. Now comes a fascinating display of high diving from the 30-metre tower. Apart from compulsory dives which have to be taken, competitors also perform dives of their own selection, special marks being awarded for their execution. You've not only got to be an expert to carry out these dives, you've got to be an expert to judge them too. The winner was Patrick of Canada. Now the men's 110 yards backstroke race. It turned out to be a thrilling contest, and Brockway of Wales just managed to defeat Hendricks of New Zealand, with Weld of Australia finishing third. A fine Welsh triumph. The final highlight in the swimming events was the men's 110 yards freestyle. Australia had a very strong contingent in this final, too strong certainly for Canada, Hong Kong and Jamaica. Australia, to be sure, were clear winners all the way. Coming up to the finish in V formation, Hendricks led his compatriots Weld and Aubrey to set a games record time of 56.6. In the marathon, a race of 26 miles, it's impossible to follow them all the way, but here's the field leaving the stadium, with England's Jim Peters a strong favourite. While they're out in the country, let's have a look at the pole vault finalists in action. Berger of South Africa makes his effort. He came in third, losing to Miller of Canada for second place. Eventually, in spite of all competition, and it was close, the winner proved to be Elliott of England, who set a games record of 14 feet. Now interest is focused on the women's broad jump. Here's Annabel Murray of Canada in action. Next, Jean Deforge, that famous English athlete, makes her bid. She won third place. Winner of this and two other events, Evette Williams of New Zealand jumped 19:11.5. And now the grimly dramatic scene as Jim Peters, 15 minutes ahead of all competition, staggers down the incline to the stadium. It was horribly distressing to watch, but this is how he has since described his feelings.
I was about to enter the cinder track when, to my amazement, my legs suddenly gave way. That was the first inclination I had of any real distress at all. I sort of picked myself up, and although I could hear the crowd roaring, I didn't quite know what they were saying, and I could sort of see what appeared to be an imaginary tape 40 yards ahead of me. And every time I picked myself and ran a few yards, it still seemed to be just as far away. But it was just like a mirage in the desert. Anyway, at the end I thought I'd made it, and I hit the tape, and I didn't remember any more until I woke up in the hospital.
The greatest thrill to which spectators were treated was the so-called Miracle Mile. From the start, Bailey of New Zealand went into the lead. Everyone knew, of course, that this race was bound to end as a tremendous duel between the world's only under 4-minute men, John Landy of Australia, holder of the world record, and Roger Bannister, first man to break the 4-minute hoodoo. Landy presently went into the lead. It was his plan to set such a cracking pace that Bannister would have nothing left for that famous final spurt of his. The Australian did go well up in front, and there was quite a gap to be closed. At the psychological moment, Bannister closed right up to Landy, and from here on, excitement rose to fever pitch. What was Bannister's plan for passing, if he could do it? When was his final kick, as he calls it, to be made? Dr. Bannister has since given the answer to that. Here are his own words on the subject.
John Landy did. He had piled on the pace tremendously in the last lap, and I had a horrible feeling then that he was getting away from me. We actually passed the 1500 meter mark in a new world record time of 3:41.9, and I just managed to get back to his shoulder at the corner, and I felt that he wouldn't expect it just before we came into the straight, and so that was when I flung myself past him. He happened, I think, at the moment to glance past him to see whether he had in fact dropped me. I flung myself past him.